live. Okay, so in the group chat, I'm basically identifying my goal for this meeting is to kind of emphasize some of the biggest, what I hope are the biggest lessons you take from this class that I think are super valuable, and see how that relates to your final project and how that kind of relates, and by final project, I mean your research essay, and how that relates to your ability to get an A on that project, which is basically you're writing an argument that's based on research that you have done and research that you're usually going to continue to do for the next 2 weeks. Most students will continue to do research and use somewhere between 10 to 15 sources to support their position. I've seen students write really good essays with less, and I've seen students use more. So it's not really about how many sources you use, but you are trying to basically use research to support your position. What I'm going to look for and what I'm hoping that you're remembering is that a successful argument is going to consider the biggest lessons that we've talked about in terms of rhetoric, which is about understanding what the audience needs and what the audience is limited by. So serious audience constraints, time, money, a sense of ease, sense of safety, sense of security, also their professional reputation, professional abilities, the whole Maslow's hierarchy all the way up to self-actualization, the idea that we, our professional standing, the income that we have, all those things we generally care about. And also, in addition to that, there are particular other, there's particular values that we have. So let's say, so not just universal values that we all care about, but particular values in a particular way. Like if you're arguing for the C.S.U. Health Services Center to include more services for students, they're going to need, they care about particular things. And so I am hoping that you do a little bit of research to understand what your audience cares about and think about making your audience, making your work tailored to that audience as much as possible, so that when you're making your argument, hey, the audience should do this, you're thinking about that you're really actually helping your audience. So that connects, and let's see, so you all can see my screen, and feel free if you have questions at any time that you want to, if this is making, if you have a question, feel free to unmute your channel. Thanks everybody for muting your channel so this audio works, and just ask the question. So before I go any further in what I mean about audience being everything, does anybody have any questions already or questions that raises? So first place I wanted to start is why we outlined. This is obvious, but I think it might actually help you consider when you're writing your work, is that in relationship to the fact that audience is everything, you're outlining for audience ease. So it's also going to help you write your work, obviously, to have a clear outline of what comes first, next, and second. But I found that usually on my writing projects, what I think the outline is at the beginning is not what the outline is at the end. But I need to get that rough outline to figure out, like, oh, actually, I'm going to change this piece to do this thing, and I'm going to delete that altogether. And now that I'm actually focusing on this particular audience, which I didn't really consider before, because I didn't know who my audience really was, now I'm going to be able to really focus on this piece. So the outline is going to change, and it gives you a framework of anticipation, in a sense, of like what's coming next. This usually, and you've seen this in a lot of the things that you probably in a lot of the research you found, that I like to call an essay map. We talked about this in terms of your cover letter as well. And this is also in scholarly work called an abstract. This really helps in a lot of presentations. They basically tell you, and again, this is review, but I'm hoping that this final essay pulls together a lot of the work that we've done. Your goal is to, anything you can do to save your audience time and make it easier on them, you should try to do and rewrite to say, in my essay, I'm going to do this, this, and this. And by the end, we hope that this audience will do this thing for this reason, or this audience will change their mind about this, or this audience will consider this. And I did a video a few weeks ago on considering hostile, friendly. So your audience can be hostile, friendly, or neutral. And so I wanted you to consider like how you might gauge your response or what you're going to say based on where they are. But I just wanted to kind of remind you that what I'm hoping, I wanted to do the big reminder of the BITZER versus VATZ. And this idea that if you're thinking that both of these are actually really helpful lenses to look at your work through, that BITZER, the idea that BITZER really gives us is that we're solving problems for people, and that you are identifying a particular urgent need that somebody has, and then you're addressing that. VATZ is helpful, I think, in this situation. In my humble opinion, not as helpful, but he's helpful in the sense that he's hopefully helping you see that there's multiple creative ways you could approach this problem, and that potentially if you're maybe not addressing a problem that is obvious, but addressing a problem that people didn't know that they had, or addressing some kind of a narrow part of this issue that shows me that you really thought about your issue and thought about a particular audience's response to it. So this gives you some kind of a creative freedom in your work. What I'm looking for excellent work is that the more you can kind of think about your research and argument as tailored to your audience, the better. Look. Thank you, Kat. Yeah, you're very helpful. So I wanted to think about that. The other thing that I wanted to remind you of is that the work of Carl Rogers. And if you remember in the Humanist, as the idea of valuing human beings, yes, you're very helpful. Oh dear. In the sense that you are trying to understand other people's positions. And the goal is not to win or convince. The goal is to offer something that's valuable. So some of the most successful essays that I've seen have taken the research that they've done and say, hey, I know this much about you. So if you're going to think about writing your essay with this in mind, which is one way to do this very excellently, let's say this is your essay. The first thing that you want to kind of establish if you're going to try to do this is that you're basically saying like, I understand you as the audience. So you're basically like, and you don't have to do this. There's so many good ways to write this essay. You basically say, I understand where you're coming from and what you're trying to do. And then you understand, and then the second part that you're basically saying is, have you considered something like this? And then these reasons that you're offering. Obviously the language might be a little different, but the general gist of what you're saying is, let's say your audience is a CSU Health Network Services. I understand the CSU Health Network Services offers these particular services for students. I also understand that you have a problem because you're not able to see very many students, or any students now. Have you considered this? So I basically get this problem you're having. Have you considered this? So and so and so and so and so forth. I think this is a really interesting way to consider all argument, that you're really trying to make sure that you understand the audience and that your writing reflects and your research reflects that you're trying to identify and help what an audience cares about. So the more your reasons, like if I see, and you're going to do a self-assessment, so you can tell me, I did an excellent job considering what my audience needs. My argument, I tried my best to tailor my argument to that particular audience. And I did that through these reasons, and I had evidence to support that and those kinds of things. The other thing that I wanted to address that's related to this, so let's say you do a more traditional argument. We can still think about how our audience, and I made this point before too, but I had another question from someone that I wanted to address, that you're basically saying your claim because reason 1, reason 2, reason 3. And then your counterclaim doesn't necessarily need to go against what you're saying. And in fact, this is kind of language from the argument culture that might not be helpful. It's more about that you're offering another perspective or audience perspective. Okay, so I'm hoping that the PowerPoint is giving you a way to consider the big outline that you're working on that shows me that you're thinking about the particular values of your audience and the universal values of your audience, if that makes sense. I should just, no, right? Does that make sense? I wish I could be like, can I get a thumbs up or a any questions on this? I know this is a review. Oh, thumbs up. Awesome. Thank you. I didn't even know you could do that. Okay. Well, let's look at the fun part of this that a lot of us are working on. Again, audience is everything. And you know that me as an audience, I like as specific as possible. And one way to get a good question that I had is, how can I get more specific with this topic? And I'd suggest there's like the 5 levels of why as one way that people like WHY. I'm going to encourage you, one way to do this is just play the annoying child game with yourself. Like in the sense that just you want to ask questions about things that seem completely obvious. So you can say like, well, why? Why? What does that mean? Why? 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 And every time you answer, so you're kind of having a conversation with yourself. Every time you answer, you're basically getting closer and clearer to making something more specific. You could also say who, how, which, where is another really good question. But that's one way that you can do really well on this assignment, is to show me that you have kind of had these conversations with yourself in a sense, or that you've interrogated your own thinking to get as specific as possible. So one clear way that you're going to improve your writing as much as possible is to get more specific. The other clear way is, how can I get more succinct? Clear. Another way of asking that question is, how can I make my writing easier to read? And this is, my answer is, there's one quote that I really like, is that all good writing is rewriting. I could say all good outlining is re-outlining as well, in the sense that you have to go over it again to make it really make sense. The other answer is that there are tools that, you spend more time with your own writing, and there are tools to help you do this. And I'm going to encourage you to play with HemingwayApp.com, which I'm going to show you. It's a Hemingway, you can just Google Hemingway Editor. And this is called This is called the Hemingway Editor because, let's see if I can, I'm going to get rid of this. Hemingway was known to make his writing incredibly concise and specific, and he his very writing economy. So this is, you can just copy and paste text in here, and you notice that they show you that things in yellow, sentences in yellow are hard to read. Sentences in red are very hard to read. Green shows you passive voice. So I say phrases in green have been marked to show passive voice. So I could say, well, phrases in green mark passive voice. Boom, made that shorter. This app highlights lengthy, complex sentences and common errors. If you see a yellow sentence, you can shorten it or split it. Well, this one is easy to fix. If you see a yellow and if you see a red highlight, your sentence is so dense and complicated that your readers will get lost trying to follow its meandering, spreading logic, try editing the sentence to remove the red. If you see a red highlight, your sentence is too dense. Simplify. Boom. Try simplifying the sentence. You can utilize a shorter word. Use. I love this example because we have learned in academic writing often that the more sophisticated we sound, the better our writing is. Sometimes it depends. Sometimes sounding sophisticated is exactly what you want, but I hope you can see that that's dependent on a situation, and oftentimes using a shorter, easier word. So instead of utilize, oh boy. Instead of utilize, I can use a shorter word in place of a purple one. Oh boy, you know what I'm saying. Lastly, Hemingway was famously against adverbs, which are words that end in ly, because you don't necessarily need them. So you can sometimes eliminate those. So this connects to a question that I answered before I started recording. Your PowerPoint is designed, passive voice. Your PowerPoint is designed to help you simplify and clarify your big ideas. You won't be able to fit everything you want to fit in. You have to decide what's most essential and then share that with us. Your audience, ideally, you're writing this PowerPoint as a way to kind of propose what you want to get from your work and how let me try that one again. You're writing this PowerPoint to propose how you're going to write your paper in a way that's gonna get feedback from me and your peers about the major things you can do to make it better. And along the way, you have a lot of your own writing to draw from. In fact, you have like 3,000 words to pull from, at least. It's intentional because I want you to spend more time with your writing. If all good writing is rewriting and you get to be a better writer at a revision stage, the best thing you can do is spend more time making little edits instead of your PowerPoint is designed. This is what makes it passive. Your PowerPoint, let's say that it should. Your PowerPoint should help you simplify and clarify your big ideas. That's basically what we're doing. So I wanted to show you, there's two things that I kind of wanted to show you. One of them is that this Hemingway app is really great. The idea that you can compose in this editor as well, as you can see. So instead of just writing in Word, you can write in this. And I think this is the greatest way to work on style. since we haven't done that. I wanted to make sure you saw that, but I also wanted you to see the visual layout of this. And there's two other things that if you do need to embed you do need to embed audio into your presentation. If you're having a hard time with that, or if you want to do it a different way, you can. Someone asked if they could just do screencast-o-matic of their work, which is basically you can do a screencast. You can record yourself. You could just do your PowerPoint full screen and then use screencast-o-matic to be able to just record yourself giving the presentation. So we did the Hemingway Editor, we did the screen, we did that. I want to show, I basically, let's see, screencast-o-matic, teaching. The other thing that I wanted to show you that's related to Hemingway Editor and making your writing easier to read on a sentence, on a grammar level, I was hoping, this is in our text. So this is actually on page, if you still have your textbook. It's on page 373, but I found this Prezi that's actually very nice in the sense that what we're doing for the PowerPoint is understanding the power of visual rhetoric. By making things simpler, you make them more powerful. By making it easier on your audience, you make it easy, you have a greater chance of success. There's very interesting studies on this where people are less prone to believe something that is written in a script that's hard to read. This is crazy. That means if I make my message simple, you're more prone to believe it. Bonkers social science. The harder my message is to get, the less likely I will believe it. So this is basically, we're trying to see still how reading and writing can help us process information on a big scale. And I'm going to skip through this to show you the main point here, that visual rhetoric is about, it's the rhetorical display of meanings through the integration of visual and verbal cues, i.e. a kind of presentation. And visual cues, by this, they mean typographical choices, which the typeface and type size. When I made some typographical choices here, probably not the best. And honestly, I could separate these out a little bit more to make it better. I like upper cap and lower cap, but that's about it. Graphics, okay. Oh, burp, burp, burp. Graphical choices are bullets and headings, and page layout choices, lists and hanging indents. She in this article does not even include, this does not include photos, even though photos and the composition of photos is a big part of this. But visual cues basically make a difference in readers' attitude towards a document or a presentation, and how readers process the information and which information they value. So Rebecca Anderson in this article, like there's different visual cues that are going on here, different headings, bold things, spacing, tables. And so we can get a visual sense of what this is, proportion of paragraphs, how long the paragraphs are. And then she relates this to how instructors write their own assignment sheets. So she basically puts instructors on blast and says, how easy are your assignment sheets to read? And the harder your assignments are to read, the less likely students are able to actually understand the importance of what you're doing. So she draws attention to the different ways that instructors organize their their assignment sheets, and how it connects to how students understand writing. And we're going to skip this example and go to the next example. She has students redesign an assignment prompt. Now, this is actually a very well-written assignment prompt, but it's got zero visual cues, and hence it's very difficult to follow. When you're done reading and taking notes, review your notes and your style of taking notes, as well as any markings you've made on the text. In the form of a journal entry on a separate page from your notes, jot down your current sense of what Dillard seems to be saying. Then on that same page, formulate 1 or 2 questions you believe will be fruitful for you and your classmates to pursue in your future work with Dillard's text. Finally, jot down a sentence or two describing how you took notes and the consequences of this way of taking notes seems to have had on your understanding of Dillard's essay so far. This is a really awesome prompt, actually. It's asking students to review the notes that they're taking and to consider how well those notes are working for them and ways that they could improve the notes that they're taking in response to Annie Dillard's essay on seeing. Annie Dillard, by the way, wrote Pilgrim at Tinker Creek. She's an exceptional nature writer. Highly recommend all of her stuff. She actually has a very wonderful book called For the Time Being. It's about death and numbers. It's one of the most incredible books I've ever read. Highly recommended. Anyway, notice then they basically have students rewrite this. And I would think that, let's see, it seems like finally there'd be a good paragraph break. Basically, I would ask, you know, how can I simplify all of this text down to just a few words? What would those words be? How could I reorganize this visually with headings to help that along? So that's basically the gist. We looked at 2 different levels of this. 1 at the level of sentences, 2 at the level of presentation as a whole, and 3 in the sense of your PowerPoint presentation and how presentations work with headings and the way this presentation works. She concludes this presentation by showing how we are all meaning making and that we order things sequentially in our mind. And that's basically when we visually organize texts based on these different ways of understanding or different ways of organizing information, we have a greater chance of serving the audience and making it easy to understand. Okay, so tips for a good PowerPoint or a great PowerPoint. You want to make it visually accessible, i.e., not hard to read. So not too much text. And also kind of goes without saying, but not in a font that's hard to read, not a hard to read font. I think normal PowerPoints, there's different recommendations, but I want to say like 3 bullet maximum on a slide. Although you probably could find different, I think this depends on the type of presentation you're giving and to what audience. But it shouldn't be just no giant blocks of text if you can help it. If you want to use a quote, a long quote from an academic source, I would ask that you just only select the key words that you need from that. So you're making the quote as short as possible. The other thing you're thinking about here is that it's visually engaging. And this is the sense of photos or images. It's also the sense of icons that are able to communicate a lot of meaning in a very short amount of space. And this is kind of review as well. But you're thinking about different ways that there's either juxtaposition, so contrast, or depth, or some kind of depth of field or meaning. That's kind of actually confusing because that could mean a lot of different things. Point being, you don't want they should be visually engaging, but not visually distracting. So your tips for a great PowerPoint, I'm going to ask, is it specific? And is it easy? And that's basically what I'm looking for. Your grades on your PowerPoint, if you can see that on your self-assessment, that I'm going to require is just 50 points are on the content of the PowerPoint. So did you do a good job thinking about your essay outline? And the other 50 points is the PowerPoint itself really good? i.e., did you use speech, text, and visuals in a way that work together and are mutually reinforcing rather than not? So that is that. That's pretty much what I had. Does anybody, any questions? You can either ask them in the chat or unmute. I'm curious, as a digital communicator myself, I'm curious if this presentation was easy to follow, or if it was helpful or not. Helpful? Gonna play with Hemingway app, hopefully. It's the jam. Cool. Well, that's all I had.
I have a question. Do you want us to have speech on every slide? Like every slide has a recorded speech bubble or whatever?
You should, unless there's a rhetorical reason not to. So even if you're just emphasizing what the slides say, you should have a planned kind of auditory piece. Yes.
Okay.
Great question. Thank you. How did the first round of the PowerPoints go? The ones that I've seen seemed really good. I'm happy with where you're taking your work, and I miss being in class. So yeah, we only have 2 weeks left, and then finals, and then onward, I guess. Cool. Well, if you have any other questions, please feel free to email me them, and I will get to them as soon as I can. If you also want feedback before, like if you feel like you're waiting on feedback from me before you do something, please email me. Or you can text or call during normal business hours, and I will help you. Otherwise, I'm just kind of slowly getting through feedback. I want to thank all of you all for being here. It was good for me to try to figure out how could I make, what are some of the biggest lessons that I can reinforce and why we're doing what we're doing. And the PowerPoint and the essay, with PowerPoint especially coming on the tails of the cover letter, if you think about that as your last big writing assignment, is to think about how can you make your ideas as simple as possible while keeping all the meaning that you have. It's super hard to fit all of that in 3 minutes, which is why I like it. And hopefully it should help you think in different ways. So I'm hopefully challenging you in that way as well. So yeah, thanks for being here and for forcing me to think about how to help, so I'm not just feeling alone over here. Should I do this again? Do you think people are going to find this valuable? Next Friday, noon Zoom? Okay, well, if you want to mark your calendars and tell your friends, if you're still, is anybody keeping in touch with anybody in our classes? I know some people are, but I've only heard that from one person. I heard, is anybody graduating in the spring? Man, well, it's gonna be interesting here for a little while, I think.
I have a question about next semester. Do you think it's going to be online, or are you privy to any information that the students don't have about that?
That's a great question. And no, not privy to any information. And I have been asking people that may know.
Okay.
I personally think at this point that we are not coming back in the fall. I think they are personal, this is my guess. I think it's too much of a liability. I think there's going to be too many cases still because we're so far behind on testing. Larimer County just opened a testing facility. We had a student we had a student that thought that they may have had it that I talked to, and they were basically, and she had like pre-existing conditions kind of situation, and through her doctor on the phone told her that she couldn't get a test until she was through the emergency room. And if she needed to come to the emergency room, because it got to this point, she needed to go through these doors and make sure she didn't talk to anybody, and then they would attend to her, and then only after all of that would she get a test. There's an estimate in New York City that they think maybe 14% of the population has it, based on a random sample of 3,000 people. I think way more people have it. So I think we're going to be online. Which means, I don't know, if I was a student in your position and everything moved online, I wouldn't come. I would be one of the students that like I would wait a semester. So they're going to take a big enrollment hit.
Yeah, that's probably what I'm going to do.
It's just not the same. I feel like a big part of the college experience is getting to sit in a room with other people that you wouldn't normally sit with and hear what they say. You know?
Yeah, and a lot of what you said about like networking towards the start of the semester,
Yes.
out the window. So
yeah, I think that's interesting. I do think there's other opportunities. I feel like the other thing that's interesting about this that I'm thinking is that I think there's a natural human urge to help people. I think people want to help. And I think our society is generally poorly suited for people to feel like they're helping. So I think there's opportunities to network with people that want to help. It's basically long and short of it. But it's not like organic. It's not like when you sit in the classroom and you're like, man, what did she say? That's cool. You know what I mean? Like you don't get that, which is a bummer. I feel like, so I don't know, man. I hope I'm wrong, but I don't think, I think colleges are weighing all of the options that they have. And I know that's one of them. There's a school in California that already called it. I don't know.
well, that kind of throws my whole my whole thesis out the window because it involves like groups of 10 people meeting together. It's group therapy.
Right.
So, I mean,
Just
like,
do it. I
yeah,
mean, don't let that derail your progress.
yeah,
Honestly, and you could easily just qualify your claim to say, when under normal circumstances or looking ahead, this is going to be more important than ever.
okay.
Or you could say video conference therapy. I don't know. I don't really know if that's a thing. So yeah, I wouldn't worry about that.
Cool.
Other questions? You still feel like you're getting something out of the semester even though it's online? I never felt like I got as much out of online classes as otherwise.
Yeah, it's not as good.
No. Are
Yeah,
you getting
sucks.
yeah. Yeah, for real. So why is that? Can I ask why?
Most of my instructors have just like resorted to posting their PowerPoints online, and they like think that that's sufficient enough for holding class. So not only are you expected to read through their PowerPoints online, but you're also expected to read through chapters in the book, and then basically you're just reading all day. And it's like, that's nothing that I couldn't just do on my own. Like, you're providing absolutely nothing to me that I couldn't do on my own. So it's just like, now it's just like doing busy work and like fulfilling a requirement. It's not like you feel like you're actually getting, like, professors aren't actually investing time into your education.
Exactly. Which you could just do at the library.
Yeah, it feels like just performing means for an end, you know, just it's not really conducive to learning. It's just conducive to doing what needs to be done to graduate the class.
And so many of my professors have switched to writing, to us, like, having assignments as papers instead of, like, tests, because they know that, like,
Yep.
quizzes and stuff can be cheated on. So then it's just, now I have, like, an absurd amount of papers to write.
Yep. It's been hard on my end to try to figure out, you know, it's like, well, you need to have like checkpoints. So you need to basically be holding students accountable to do work. But then just by doing that, it seems like that creates more work. So then it's like, how do you, you know, I wish I could just be like, write an essay and everything would be good. But, you know,
Yeah.
it's good to hear feedback. It seems
I
like
like having checkpoints because I'm a procrastinator. So if I didn't, I would do everything at the last minute.
exactly.
So.
We all, I think 80 to 90% of people are like that, especially when you have all these things to do. Yeah, I know for me, there's still the game of like trying to get things done in a creative way, trying to find the play in it. So instead of like reading, like when you have a bunch of stuff that you don't want to read that you have to read, if you can kind of figure out a way to gamify it in a way. Or I really like the artistic aspect of like taking notes, just so it sounds bad, but like just the visual, like for me, like physically writing down notes is, and thinking about size and where everything goes. And I remember geeking out about that and all the way through grad school. And that's one way to make it more engaging. But I don't know. Well, I hope this is helpful. And again, if you are waiting for feedback from me to move on, please let me know, because I'm getting through giving people feedback, but it's taking me a little while. Reading the records of research, reading the research always takes a long time. Cool.
Yep.
Well, I hope to be able to talk to some of you one-on-one, and if you want to chat. And yeah, this is actually have Annie Dillard's Pilgrim. Oh boy, Pilgrim at Tinker Creek won a Pulitzer Prize. Publishers Weekly says this book of wonder is one of the truly beautiful books of this or any season. And then Time magazine says Dillard is stalking the reader as surely as any predator stalks its game. A remarkable psalm of terror and celebration. She writes about nature, and let me tell you, nature's brutal. Nature will kill your ass. So there's that. I hope you guys are finding fun things to read. But you don't, because you're reading everything all day. Well, anyway, thank you all. I'm gonna
Thank you.
close this down. See you all later. Peace.
Thanks. Bye.
See ya.
Weird.